I knew Desmond from like I think half our lives now. We first met, I think he was 17 years old, basketball. We fight on the basketball courts. In fact, the first time we really like fought on the basketball courts. A highly competitive person, but now like a super entrepreneur, right? Like Quick Force, the case that you read, it's actually one of his, I would say, maybe like first ventures in US, right? But it would have been like, I don't know, the X number of ventures since he has started. And each time I catch up with him, because it's so tough, right? It's halfway across the world. Each time I catch up, like one time you're doing a travel thing, the next time he's doing something else. Most recently, I spoke with him. He just flew from Utah back to San Francisco, like catching up with technology. So he's always has something new up his sleeve. And I thought it would be amazing for him to come and share with you because he's someone who has been there, done that, worked with VCs before, and someone who's very familiar with the US landscape, right? Because then that's where the heartbeat, in fact, he stays in San Francisco, is where the heartbeat of VC is, right? So I wanted to first open it up to Desmond to share about his ventures, like what he's doing right now, as well as a little bit maybe about QuickForce, just recapping the case as well. And then really the floor is yours, right? It's for you to ask any questions. I'm quite sure he won't lie. And yeah, the floor is yours. All right, so Desmond, over to you.
Awesome. Can you all hear me well? Awesome. Well, hi everyone. It's very nice to meet you all, and it's great to be in this class. So thank you so much for having me here. Awesome. Yeah. So let me start by sharing with you a bit more about me. I'm from this Singapore. Grew up there. I came to the US about 5 years ago. Came here for school, in this actually Boston. Was in Boston for 3 years, and now I'm out in the Bay Area for the past 2 years already. So I actually founded QuickForce, I think, in the start of second year when I was in the US, it was summer of 2014. So it was really back then, me and my best friend from school, his name is Phil Harpy, and we were living on the same floor back at this Harvard dorm, and we wanted to come up with this idea to try and start something, and we were just like, what pain point do we really want to solve? So we actually wanted to solve something like, and then I came up with this idea of trying to solve the pain of trying to help movers to get jobs, because like the whole sector is very old, like people are using phone calls, and even it's very old school, email, phone calls. So and I came up with this idea, what if we have an app that can help movers or even drivers who wants to get jobs to move things from point A to B better. And that was back in summer 2014. I think it was almost 3.5 years back already. So me and Phil just started to work on this idea, and we were working out of a place called Harvard Innovation Lab, and we just worked out of that. It was just two of us from the start, and we didn't have any software skills, so we started to find someone who can build the app for us, and that whole process was pretty fun and so challenging but fun, and love to share more since I'm now talking to a crowd of this, I would think, business students, that must be something that is like on your mind. How do you build software when you may not be the one to code? So that's been a challenge that I faced for the past 3-4 years. So very glad to share more on that. Coming back to the story, so I wanted to build an app to help drivers, movers to get jobs better. And that whole story is because my dad, he's been a driver for the past 35 years, and I grew up seeing him having to move things from point A to B, and how it was a huge pain. So I even named my first venture in the US after his venture, which is called QuickForce, but my dad's company has a C. The funny thing is Phil found that QUIKFORC.com was very cheap, so we bought this domain name because it was cheap, and hence we named the company QuickForce without a C. So fast forward, I was doing it for actually nearly 2 years. I have actually stopped doing it now. So happy to talk about like ups and downs of failure, because what you read in the news is always very great. If you ask any founder, they are always saying we are killing it. Things are going great, because that's what founders always say, But there's always a lot of truth underneath. And since I'm here with this class, I'm very glad to share a lot of these honest thoughts. So yeah, and then I moved out to the Bay Area in 21, 6. But prior to that, I was also part of a fund. I think YK was sharing that too. I was actually part of a fund. It's called Dorm Fund, which is a fund that invests into this student-run startups. I was doing that for about 1 year, based in Boston. And I funded about 8 to 9 startups coming from Harvard, MIT, Tufts, BU. Being out in the Bay Area for the past 2 years, I would say it's very different from this actually Boston, East Coast, West Coast. Happy to talk about that too. I think West Coast is definitely bigger. The whole tech scene is much bigger. So I was just sharing that I was actually moving house. So I used to live on Sand Hill Road, and if you all search online, Sand Hill Road is the road where all the top venture funds in the world are at. Like your funds like Sequoia, KPCB, and so all the top funds were really just 5-10 minutes walk from my house. So I was living there for about nearly 2 years, and I just moved not far. I moved about 10 minutes away. So yeah, I will just take a pause here. I just wanted to, I think we can focus my time around my 5 years in the States. I have also spent time in China. My wife is she's from China. She runs a fund too. So I have spent time both in China, Southeast Asia, and in the US. So my wife actually used to work for KPCB, Kleiner Perkins, for 5 years back in China. And she had already backed several billion-dollar companies, and she just finished Stanford Business School, and she just closed a $150 million fund, US China fund. So yeah, so happy to talk and share about any topics. So I wanted to share a quick overview of my 5 years thus far. So maybe I will pause here.
Okay, thanks, Desmond. So maybe just to frame it up, right? Like it really brings the experience from all facets, right? That we just talked about. Fundraising part. So his wife from the China perspective, but also Desmond himself managing the school-led type of venture fund. Then from an entrepreneurial point of view, he has done both, East meets West, and successes meets failures as well. So any questions around both from a fundraising side or from a VC perspective or from an entrepreneurial perspective? Questions? The first one's always toughest, but please, Florian.
I think the first question for me would be, you've mentioned that it's very difficult to find a software engineer or a coder for yourself, and that's actually my question about the team, because we are mostly business students. So how am I going to find the right coder and who's not stealing my idea, kind of thing?
Yeah. Yep, got it very clear. So I think there's always a few ways. Let me quickly list a few different ways that you can do it, and I have probably tried them all. So if you have some funding and if you have no funding, it's very different. So and some funding could be 20 grand, 30 grand. It doesn't have to be so much, but having some money and having zero money is very, very different. So let me start with the way where if you have no money at all, one thing you could do is, if you guys are at this NUS, so definitely I think NUS is one of the best engineering school. So start to hang out with some of those students, try and be friends. It takes some time for someone to like you enough to want to build software for you for free, maybe for some shares, So it is not something I think it's very typical business school student going to the software engineering school and trying to say, hey, can you build me this app? It's going to change the world, But it's sometimes harder to sell than that. So try to share your time across your friends from business school, but also your friends from other schools who can build software. That's one way to do it. The other way is you could try to hire someone, or try to find someone who is still in the school and pay him or her using shares or some cash. I think these are the two ways that, if you don't have any funding at all, these are the two ways to do it. But there's also one other way to do it where today there's a lot of almost free apps where if you are building like a e-commerce company, you can use like, Shopify, or you can use like, Wix or Squarespace, where you can put on some form of this landing page. And maybe one more quick point to add, one more option you have is many times you do not need much software to validate and test an idea. So many times you can talk to clients and actually validate the idea without building anything at all. Let's say if you are trying to do moves like me, you don't need any app to do a move. Just do some ads on Facebook and start moving house, rent a truck and move, So once you do like 10, 20 moves, you earn some cash flows, then you can try to hire someone to build an app. So anyway, this is the first path where without funding. With some funding, I think there's a few ways. One is you can go online there's many like software outsourcing sites like Upwork, TopTal, and there's a wide range of like prices. You can hire a shop, you can hire someone to build a software for you. I think one thing you can do is you can always get a friend who's a software engineer to vet them for you. That is very, very, very key, because as someone with stronger business background, it's very hard for you to vet whether this person is good. It's really worth the time to vet. Spend like a few hours getting someone to give this person who you are trying to hire like a test, coding test. So I'll say these are the two different paths you could take.
Wonderful. Others? No, and I think it's very interesting, right? Because what Desmond was sharing is very much to the lean startup methodology that we discussed the last time, right? You don't need to get to perfection. Like as entrepreneurs, we like to envision what the end state should look like and think, hey, I need this resource, hey, I need that resource, and then try to build it from scratch, right? What the end state should look like. But I think what Desmond was pointing out, hey, you just need to run some ads and move, right? Just need to prove the concept first. So the proof of concept, the minimal viable product, is very different from the prototype and the prototype 2.0 and the end state product that should look like. So really get a sense of like how much do we need to get to the first milestone versus like the end in mind, right? Thanks, Desmond. Other questions? All right, let's take the first question first then. Desmond, do you get that?
Yeah. I think yes. I think then I was very clear that I really wanted to try and start something. Then I was finishing my first year in like school. And I think getting into the Harvard Innovation Lab was great. But I think if you just look around you, there's always a lot of these options, be it for space or be it for mentors. There's always, I think people are very keen to help. Generally, there's always people who wants to help, So I think it's actually not that hard for you to get help, be it for space or for some seed funding or for some people to help you. I think it's always doable. So I think for me, I was very clear that I really wanted to like try to start something. So the answer is yes.
And that's a question from Moses, who's also the only Singaporean, right? I think in this class. So
yeah, Singapore is always home. I'm still going back at least once a year, if not twice a year. So I definitely hope to be able to do something back home. So my first few startups or so-called businesses were actually done back home. I founded my first business right after high school. It was a tutor to student matching business. Did that for about 2 years. Then after that, I actually founded a Thai food restaurant for 3 years while I was still back in school. So I did my undergrad back home. Um, so I've actually founded several businesses back home already, and they were all great. I think both Singapore and the US have its pros and cons. Definitely, I think the pro, of course, of the US or China is one big market with the same legal, cultural framework, which is helpful when you're trying to scale to actually get the size. For Singapore, which I'm sure you all know, is that you probably have to think about growing beyond from the first day because it's more about a Southeast Asia play or like a Asia play, So it's generally harder to be able to just do a business only back here and be able to like grow it. I'm sure many firms have been able to do it, but from a software point of view, I think it's a bit harder. So I think both sides have its pros and cons. So my answer is yes. I mean, I definitely love to be able to do something back home, and I'm still trying to find that angle. So yeah.
Yeah, what are the aspects that really make it different from Zurich, for instance?
Yeah.
How quick working is different from the
Yeah. I think there's a lot of different factors. When you think about how are you different, I think first thing is early stage startups often worry too much about competition, because you are all so small and you're worried, oh, he's doing the same idea, he's doing the same, but it's so hard, this whole journey is so small that until you are a size that is at least Series B, Series C, you really don't have to worry so much, and there's many ways that you can be different. I think for us, we were probably the only player in this Boston during that time, and Boston had about 75 schools, so definitely there was a lot of ground for us to cover. Students moving in and out at least 3 to 4 times every year. They always have to move. So I think there was a lot of. So I think one was we were based in this Boston. So even though there were other players in other parts of the US or maybe other parts of the world, there really wasn't so much to think about because we were just focused there to do well there. I think that's the first point. I think the second point was there's a few different players with a few different models. Some were partnering with people with trucks. We were actually working with small moving firms, much more than people with trucks. And once again, there's like pros and cons of doing that. And another way that was different was that how do you do sales? How do you get your sales out there, get your word out there? I think there's so many different ways that you can be different from other firms out there. For us, I think we were definitely focused on the schools, doing a lot of this partnerships with the schools, trying to work with students, at least from the start. And afterwards, we were having a lot of these partnerships with maybe real estate companies, condos, So I hope that is helpful for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very, very much linked to what we again discussed last week. That the idea itself is actually not very precious, right? And often entrepreneurs get caught up in getting VCs to sign NDAs and things like that. See, the idea is worthless. It's all about execution, right? And I think as Desmond points out, and he's getting cold as well. I think as founders, it's just focusing on executing well first. Then think about how to outdo, right? Although, yeah, I mean, a frame of reference of how different you are is always useful as you pitch, right? Otherwise, what's the difference, right? to current offerings. I think going back to the other comment as well, it's I think quite linked to what we discussed. I'm not sure if it's this class or the evening class, but you know, the Singapore or Southeast Asian mindset is very different from the China US mindset, just because you do need to scale. There's no captive market in Singapore, right? It's always a hub, a door into Southeast Asia, right? And the cultural differences, the language differences, the buying behavior of consumers is just totally different. So that's one nuance that entrepreneurs need to work around. And as VCs, when you think about how this idea can scale up, that needs to be considered as well, right? Okay, Swapna.
Hello, Desmond. I was just wondering if you could share your experience in the first time you approached a prospective investor.
Yeah, that's a good one. Let me share more. So I think it's funny. It was in the US when I first raised funding. I've never raised funding before prior to coming to US because I never really built any software driven company when I was back home. So in the US, I think it was 2015. I think it was late 2015 when I think it was middle to late 2015 when I was going to finish school, when I actually met with a friend, someone who was my classmate at school, at this Harvard, but he's a bit older. He's like maybe 15 years older than me. So he had already founded and sold his company several times over, but he came back to school. Let's call him R. His name is, let's just call him R. And then so I met R at school and we just started to like chat, and I was sharing with R about what I was trying to build. I didn't try to pitch for funding at all. But he was the one who said, hey, let's chat. He was saying that he is actually running a fund and he's trying to talk to startups. So me and R really just met several times over the next few months, you know. I didn't try to pitch him from the first day. I think it was really just over time and sharing with him what I was trying to do. And I think he believed in me, he believed in the team, and he believed in what we were doing. So he actually wrote the first check for us. And I think it's always challenging for a first-time founder or first-time tech founder when you're trying to raise funding. I learned that, so for this quick force, I actually raised about $1 million over a period of about 6 months. And I found that actually half or more of them were angels, and they were people who I have worked with or who I knew from the past. And about less than half were some seed funds, angel funds, you know, people who I never met. And I found that it was always easier to raise funding from someone who I had some form of this contact with, you know, because I think VCs or like angels, they need some contact and they need some time to make a judgment call on you, you know? So it's very hard to meet someone for the first time and then just to get money. But there was actually one person. There was one of my angels. I've never met him. We did one call and the call was less than half an hour. It wasn't even very clear. He's a Singaporean who has done very well and he was based in Asia. And he actually gave me a check after that first call. So that was really shocking to me. But me and him, we had something in like common. He actually went to the same high school as me, which is the same high school as Y Kid or so. So he's like a senior who is 20 years older than me. And I think he believed in that common thread. And I think trying to find things in like common is often very helpful too. Going to the same school, having work in the same firm, you know, I think like trying to ask for money is also trying to build trust, you know, and I think having something in like common is also very helpful. And it may sound strange to you, like, oh, I've talked for so long, why didn't I talk about the idea and all that stuff? But I think the truth is, early stage is always about the team, founders. The idea is key, but the idea is almost always going to change. So, yep.
So I promise you that I didn't share notes with Desmond, yeah? But because like he just like repeated everything that we covered last week, right? Like so Desmond, we did this in-class activity where the class was split into founders and VCs, and they were told that they would need to find a match between them. And then there was a marketplace, right? Like VCs were saying like, hey, where are the entrepreneurs? Entrepreneurs saying, hey, where are the VCs? But that's not how it works. And you know, and in real life, as Desmond has pointed out, that's not how it works too, right? You just get to know people, right? It's not transactional. It's trust-based, right? This whole ecosystem is about collaboration. It's not about a competition of like which ideas should get out first, which financing should be whipped in, and that's really how it is, right? So I think it's the mindset of just going out there, sharing the idea, and see what comes back, right? We had one other. Oh yeah, Florian, another question.
Yeah, are you trying to ask more about how do I form the team? Or are you trying to talk about who should I find, like what first hires or first teammates should I find?
Maybe both.
Okay, sure. I think trying to find like a strong founding team or founders is very key because trying to start something is so challenging, and many times I would say, you feel very, very lonely if it's just you. So I think the best way is at least 2 or 3 founders is the best. I think 4 or 5 is a bit too big. I mean, definitely companies have done well with 4 or 5 too, but I think 2 or 3 is the best mix. And it's better to try and start something it's better to start something with someone who you trust, someone who you have done some work with. I'm not sure if you want to start something with your best friend or your wife or your husband. I would think twice about that because it's very challenging. There's a lot of ups and downs. So definitely look for someone that you trust. I think someone who you have worked on something with. And I think being in school is the best chance for that. So definitely trust is very key to build that strong founding team. Look for 2 to 3 people and try to look for people with different strengths from you.
Like, what did you go to them and say, hey, I read the survey, I'm aware, or like, did you go to them and you have no idea?
One thing I learned is that trying to be honest and open is very key because the team is so small. I think in my first year of doing this, I was always very scared to share too much stuff, trying to keep data and news and trying to keep information from the team. Sometimes, as you may have read in the case, because I wasn't sure what was the best way to lead because it's so hard. I'm trying to manage people who could be older than me, who could have done much more stuff than me, or who could be So I think after I got this survey, it was a bit of an up and down. I felt a bit like down for a while, but I think I actually picked myself up pretty fast. In a few days, I went to talk to the team. I started to have one-on-ones. It's very hard to talk to. I shared with the team as a whole, but I also had a lot of one-on-ones with them. And I learned that having timely one-on-ones is very key for the team from the start, which is what I'm having now with my current team. That is very, very key. So, yeah. So I would say that being open and direct is very key for a small team because the team is so small. It's very hard to hide anything. So, yeah.
Going right back to the beginning, how did you, once you had the concept, how did you go about doing your market research? And also after that, how did you first getting customers backing?
Yeah. So, Waiki, can you say it
Sure.
one more time, please?
So the question was around like how do you validate your idea with market research, right? And actually even beyond market, how do you even validate your idea, right? Because this is something that you were passionate in, but how do you validate that indeed there's a market for it and there's the concept is sound, right?
Yeah. Let me share with you what I did when I first founded QuickForce, and I'll also share with you what I will do now. I think that will be very helpful for the class. So when I first started QuickForce, I think how I validate it was I was actually doing a lot of like online searching and trying to read online a lot. And I also talked to some people, some of my friends who were having to move. I will talk to my friends from school, trying to learn about their like pinpoint. So definitely it was a lot of online searching, trying to come up, and I was trying to post some ads too, trying to post some ads on this Facebook. I saw there was a lot of my friends who was posting on online Facebook trying to say who has a truck, who can lend a truck because I have to move. So they will post online, and I would actually talk. I would talk to them online and say that, hey, I can help to do the move, and I will try to actually do the move for them and trying to do a few moves to see what was their real pinpoint. I will do the first few moves on my own. So I think these were, sorry?
Yeah, did you already get into contact or partner with someone, or did you just hire a vehicle and just go to it?
Back then I just rented a van. I think I used something called Zipcar in the US, Zipcar or U-Haul. I just borrowed a van. I rent a van on my own, and renting a van costs about $40 per hour, and I was charging about $100 or $120 per hour for the move. So I really did the first 20, 30 moves on my own. After which I went on to do nearly the first 100 over moves on my own too. Or rather, I was part of the first 100 move, and I did the first 20 moves on my own or with Phil or with a friend. So that was also, and by doing that, I was able to see what was the pinpoint and what they were doing.
So the question was around after your 20 moves or after your first 100 moves, right? How do you then promote your business? What was like your marketing strategy?
Yeah, so I think it was a lot of, from the start, I had one that was pretty fun, that was pretty cool. I'm pretty active on Facebook, so I actually joined a lot of groups. I joined maybe about 150 groups on Facebook, a lot of Harvard, MIT, Tufts, BU, a lot of school groups, a lot of like Southeast Asian students at Harvard or foreign students at Harvard or business clubs. I was about 150 groups, and I would post every week in all of these groups, and it was free. It was free to post. So I think that was one way that I actually test my idea. And posting in groups it worked, I would say, fairly well, because you would have friends or common friends who would like or comment your posts. And since I had a pretty active profile, that was helpful. So I think that was one of the more fun ways that I did to actually get some traction. Yeah, and maybe I paused there. I want to spend a few minutes talk about what I would do now. I think what I would do now is actually I would spend a lot of time trying to meet with these clients who could be my clients, and not only talk to them, I would ask them open-ended questions. I would actually aim to talk to at least 50 to 100 over clients, trying to talk to them, and actually even better, watch them. Talk less, but watch them and watch what is the pinpoint that they face now. In the context of moving, I would actually stand over their shoulders and watch how they struggle to go onto Yelp to find a mover, or how they struggle to do a Google search to find for movers. I would actually watch them in action, and I would also ask them a lot of this open-ended questions. I would spend at least half an hour with every person that I talk to, if not more. And I think I would actually spend maybe almost 1 to 2 months on this part or more, trying to talk to 100 or more customers to really learn about what is their pain point. I think when I was doing Quick Force, I kind of had an idea to build an app. Then I came back to say, hey, what pain point was it trying to solve? I did it the other way, which is not the best. I think what I will do now is really talk to a lot of people, or watch them how they struggle with their current pain point, and then be very clear about what is the pain point. In the case of moving, was the pain point trying to find a cheap mover? Was the pain point trying to size up how long and how much the move will cost? Or was the pain point trying to find a mover that you can trust? Because sometimes you don't really trust them. So I would actually spend a lot more time on trying to dig very deep into what is the pain point before I actually build anything or even trying to go to do sales. So I think that is what I will do now.
Did you ever stretch into B2B rather than straight to consumer, or were a lot of your customers businesses as well?
Yeah. So actually, I don't know if you all follow, but Paul Graham, who's the founder for Y Combinator, actually writes a very good post about this. You all can search him online. He's saying that always try to solve a deep and narrow pain point that is very deep and very painful, and don't try to solve a pain that is like very broad and maybe it is not too deep. If it's not too deep a pain, I think Paul Graham shared very well that if you're trying to build like a social network for pets, and if you ask your friends, they will all say that, oh, that's a good idea. My pets are bored. Sometimes they wish they can meet other pets. It seems to be a pain point, and many people have dogs and cats in the world. It's a very broad pain point. So why don't you solve that pain? Because it's a $1 billion market, but the problem with that is it's very hard to start with a very broad but not that deep pain for several factors. I think it's very hard to get people to love your product, or it's very hard for people to try your product if the pain is not deep enough. So I would actually say that start with a very deep and narrow pain, even if it's with a seemingly very small group of people, but that can always grow. And just to quote some very famous cases, Facebook started from just building this social network for one school. It was just for Harvard. It seems like a very small idea, just a social network for one school, but quickly it grew very fast. And if you think about Airbnb, when they were trying to start, they were trying to actually only focus on people who were flying in for events and couldn't find a place to stay because hotels were still costly. So it was really focused only on events. But they also quickly grew out from that. So I would say that definitely try to focus on seemingly a narrow but very deep pain point. And one other reason that is good for doing that too is because if the pain is very big, probably someone else is doing it already. If you're trying to create the next social network or trying to create the next shopping site online, I'm sure there's many players out there. So if it's a big pain point, if it's a deep pain point and many people face it, it's very rare to find it these days, because there's so many players trying to start something. So I would advise to start something that is narrow, very deep pain point, and with a seemingly small group of people. But you must also be able to see the growth that can come from that. I mean, don't go and start something like selling bottles to people who like rate like bottles, because it's a very narrow and maybe harder to scale from that. Try to find a pain point that is deep, narrow, very painful, but you can see that this can grow, that the pie can grow.
Yeah, okay, but now what's the challenges that there's to?
Like the challenge of quick force right now.
Yeah.
So I think Desmond, you sharing that.
Yep. I have moved on from QuickForce. Yeah. But maybe what I can share is that I think QuickForce definitely had a lot of challenges. The biggest challenge was really moving is very one-off. People move once and they are done. So it's not like if you need to eat food or if you need to like clean your house. It's something that you may want to do it every week or nearly every day. If you want to hail a ride, you may need it every day. But when you think about moving house, it's a pretty deep pain point. But the problem with it was that you move once, generally once every few years on the average. Some people don't move for 10, 20 years, So I think that was probably the biggest challenge that I faced when I was doing it. The other problem was working with movers. They were very old school, very backward. They couldn't use software, so it's very hard for them to adopt the software that we built. So that was another challenge that we faced too. Yeah. So I would say these are the two biggest challenges that I faced when I was doing it. I even tried to pivot QuickForce from a more like a B to C to more like a B to B model, trying to build software for other moving companies. But it was also very challenging for point two that I raised, that moving companies are very backward and often hard for them to use software. And I found that the biggest pain for moving companies, it was actually not software, but it was leads. It was sales. Moving company really care about sales and care about leads, getting more business in and less about software.
Which job? Oh, QuickForce. Right. So the question was like, as with QuickForce, what was the most enjoyable thing there?
Yeah, I think for me it's always about the people and the team. Actually me and YK, we met playing ball, basketball. We were playing ball together for nearly, I would say, we were playing ball together for nearly like 10 whole years. And I think it was always about the team and the people. And when I was trying to look about what I wanted to do for my life for the next 30, 40, 50 years of my career, I always want to think about, I want to build something because I think I probably had the most leverage and the most say in how I built the team. It was actually pretty similar to playing sports. I was very lucky when I was playing sports to have a choice of who to work with, who was going to be on my team, to actually craft that team. And I felt like building a business was similar. I mean, if you are in a job, you may have some choice about what company you want to be in. You may have some choice about what team you want to be in, but once you chose that company and that team, you probably can't change your colleagues unless you are the boss or the CEO. But even a CEO in a large company really doesn't have that much power at all. So I think starting a business, I really had a lot of, like, I would say, choice of who I want to be spending my time with every day, because a job or work takes up so much of your time. So I think one of the most fun part has been, one of the most fun but also, I would say, tough part is being able to choose who I want to spend my time with and trying to build a team. I think that has been really fun for me to learn and to grow. So, yeah.
Cool. So thanks for the question, and thanks, because I think this is a very good point to wrap up, where it's not just about, financing. We think about VCs, about financing, about ROI and all the Excel models behind it, but again, it's back on trust, and it's an advisory type of relationship, right? And it's going back to Desmond's point, it's about the team, about people. I think we discussed again last class that, hey, your average lifespan of a ideation to like pre-seed, seed, and Series C onwards, like it's actually longer than the average tenure of a marriage in US. So you definitely need to enjoy the time that you're spending with your co-founders in your team. All right. So thanks Desmond. Thank you. Can go back to shifting houses.
Yeah. I mean, And maybe I just want to end off with like, thank you so much for having me. It was really great to meet with the class. I'm very glad to actually keep in touch. If any one of you have any questions, you can give them my email, and I'd be happy to like answer, to actually take some follow up like questions from there. Yeah.
Thank you, Kira.